Humans are really good
Welcome to the Financial Therapy Podcast. I'm your host and your financial therapist, Jane Monica Jones. In this episode, we're talking money, shame, deserving and adversity. The latter, of course, we will all go through at some stage in our life. Through a loss of a job, maybe a loss of a loved one, an illness, or even having some mental health issues.
Our system all walks of life and other countries didn't seem to matter what kind of income your husband might have or what kind of house that you lived in. You could end up on the street.
How do governments, non-for-profits and even us deal with adversity? And what are the impacts adversity have not only on our financial lives, but our sense of self-worth? We'll look at who deserves what when it comes to the public purse, and what are the hard decisions care organisations have to make with limited resources for those that face adversity. We'll also be delving into an unconscious bias that we know exists, but often don't want to talk about. It's called worthy bias, who we deem as being worthy of time, money, resources, and the like. To help unpack, uncover, and maybe enlighten us, we speak with Jan Hatch, a Gestalt therapist who has a master's in social and public policy. So thank you for joining us as we have a bigger conversation about us and money. And remember to subscribe to the Financial Therapy Podcast. Thank you so much, Jan Hatch, for being here.
It's a pleasure, Jane. Thank you for inviting me.
I want to dive right in because we've got so much to discuss. Do you want to just give us firstly a bit of your background?
Happy to. Treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and for about 40 years, starting off as a volunteer in my teens, probably doing work around the church that my family belonged to. And then I went into
humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what is what's
as
in
a
and what's
professional,
out.
probably when I was in my late 20s, having worked in the banking sector and really being very appalled at that whole capitalist making money and regardless of what else happened. So my first role was really I was on a board of directors for a women's refuge, the first women's refuge in Canada, back in the late 70s, and so that was all about providing emergency shelter for women
Humans
who
are really good at defining what's worthy and what is what's in and what's out. I mean, it's kind of that tribal idea.
We have teenagers coming in who've been sexually abused by step-parents and others in their lives. And so that was a salutary treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, working in an on-the-ground service, where I met people and certainly within the world that we live in now, our system here in this country and other countries didn't seem to matter what kind of income your husband might have or what kind of house that you lived in. You could end up on the street. And so that was a really eye-opening experience for me. And I then went on to set up the first national telephone helpline for carers when I moved to the UK.
People in a certain way,
and so the carers organization that I worked with was pretty amazing because certainly within the world that we live in now, had to give up our system care in this country and other countries as well. It's very punitive. We're relying for a large part of their financial security on government benefits because they didn't have necessarily the money to live on, and certainly often had to give up their work and their own lives and their own homes to provide care. And I then went on to work for 8 years with the Multiple Sclerosis Society, which was the fifth largest medical charity in the UK and the second largest and other countries MS organization.
It's very punitive.
And that was again a really fascinating experience because of course MS affects people in varying ways, from not very much to complete and total disability that people often live with for many, many years. And so the financial treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and if you don't, significant in many, many cases. And certainly within the world that we live in now, 20 and 50 primarily, though, younger and other countries, older people get diagnosed with it as well. It's affecting people at the primary time of their life for starting their careers, starting families, and so the financial implications are really huge for them.
Before we started this conversation, you were talking a little bit about how, these organizations have a limited budget and they're having to make decisions about who gets that, who is worthy enough of sorts to get the limited budget or care that they have. I think it's a big conversation that we probably don't have enough of a conversation about. The thing called worthy bias or worthiness bias, or who is actually worthy to get our limited resource, what certain organizations have to play God with.
Well, and I think all organizations treat people in a certain way, whether they're from a governmental perspective. That's a kind of, and that's certainly within the world that we live in now. Our system here and government, of course, is embedded in our culture as a whole about who's worthy to receive support and what's in and what's out. That's a huge kind of area that we could delve into for hours, but we won't. And in order to be, you look at all kinds of services that are provided, have a safety net we talk about to support people in a certain way, speak a certain language, who run into difficulties in life, who lose jobs, who have mental health problems, who certainly become disabled, who need care, who are homeless, who don't have family and friends to support them. Very punitive. And we know that the demographics of that is changing over time as women get older, and so the largest group of people who are actually becoming homeless are women over 50 in this country, but they're kind of invisible to us because we treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, people are supposed to look like who are actually well off. They look like middle class certainly people. Within had good jobs, they've had our system, they've had nice homes, and other countries then they find themselves with no financial resources. Humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what is what's in organizations that have set up themselves to support these people outside of the government context. And in order to be to add support services that are specifically for a particular group of people, like people aren't treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language. And these organizations are set up, as Dan Pallotta says, and certainly within the world that we live in now, the problems of hunger, of poverty, of homelessness, of disadvantage, of mental illness, of people suffering and living with chronic medical conditions that are disabling. And these organizations have to beg for money and in order from people who then you have to make judgments about whether or not the organization is worthy, treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and so they jump through a million hoops to try and make their particular and certainly within the world that we live in now, worthy. Our system here in this country and so there's a other whole countries as well. It's very punitive. Many hoops. Humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what is what's in and what's that we can. I mean, it's kind of that tribal in itself. You're marketing in our tribe or you're marketing out. And in order to be in, marketing you have to look a certain way, behave a certain way, have a certain amount of stuff, making them look, treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, like they deserve our support. Then you're out. And you'll always find, I remember working in the world that we live in now with the MS Society, and they showed us a series of other countries as well, TV advertisements that they made, and they said, this is how it works. You start off showing people what's in really, really sad. I mean, it's kind of that really, tribal, like those African children, or you're out. And in order to flies and looking really skinny and everybody looking really downtrodden, you then ask, treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and you end up the advertisement with them looking happy because your support is certainly within the world that we live in now. Our deserving in this country and other countries. So they start off being objects of poverty, but humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what is what's in and what's out. We've supported them and we've made them healthy, and that's how it works in the nonprofit sector. And in order to be, and I can keep going for hours, Jane. So just tell me to behave a certain way, have a certain amount of stuff, or treat people in a certain way,
it is a big subject, Jan, and I think it's really interesting that there's that. What you're saying is around how we're almost building out sort of deserving storylines to make us give, but it's often that we don't consider it. I haven't considered it enough. Building that image of viewed as being more deserving or more worthy. There's almost that battle between organisations and build that image of our people being more deserving of your support, government support,
language, and if you don't,
and how that becomes a marketing pitch.
And certainly within the world that competition is great, because the funds are limited and other countries because it's very punitive, having to appeal to our individual motivations, what's in and what's out. Or there's a whole industry around how you get super rich people or you're out to donate to your organization, and then there's another body of work that's all about how you get corporations to treat people in a certain way, and you have to somehow make your group of people and certainly within the world attractive to them as a proposition for their marketing and other countries as well. It's a very complex area. Humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what's in and what's out. It's kind of that tribal idea. Okay, so I'm in the organization now, and in order to be some money to support, you have to look a certain way,
I'll use multiple sclerosis
have a
as an
certain amount of
example to
staff,
support people who need financial assistance to buy the appropriate wheelchair or to make a home adaptation
and
so that
certainly
they can
within
live in their
the
home or
world that
to
we live in
help
now,
their carer,
our system in this country and other countries
get a break on a regular
it's very
basis.
punitive.
So I've got a certain amount
Humans
of
are
money
really good at defining what's
available
what
to
is
me.
what's in
So
and
what
what's
I then
out.
have to do is I have to decide which category
in our
of
tribe
people.
or you're
So which
out.
hoops
And in
do
order
they
to
have
be
to jump through in order to get my financial? So what I have to do is establish criteria.
Treat people in a certain way,
speak a
through
certain
those
language,
hoops,
and
if
in
you
order to
don't,
be able to
then
get
you're
money
out.
from my organization,
and certainly
to
within the
support
in
them.
the world that we live
So
in
again,
now,
we're
our
weeding out
system here in
those
this
people
country
who are
and
worthy
other
of
countries
our
as well.
support,
It's
and
very
those people
punitive.
who are just going to have to go
Humans
find
are really
support
good at
somewhere else
defining
or
what's worthy
live
and what is
their,
what's
live
in
their
and what's
lives
out.
without support.
It's kind of that tribal
And of
idea.
course,
In our
I
tribe
guess multiple
or you're
sclerosis
out.
isn't
And in
a
order
great
to be
example
in,
because
you have to look
most
a
of the
certain
people
way,
we know
behave a certain way, have a
demographically who
certain
get
amount of
multiple
staff, or
sclerosis
treat
are
people in a certain way,
people
speak
in
a certain
Western
language,
countries,
and if you don't, then you're
who
out.
are generally speaking in the prime
and
of their
certainly
life,
within the
between
in the
20
world
and
that we
50,
live
who
in now,
generally
our
speaking look
system
like
here
we
in this
look,
country
like you and I,
and other
Jane,
countries
white,
as well.
middle
It's very
class-ish,
punitive.
whatever that means.
Humans are really good at
people.
defining what's worthy
And
and what
so,
is what's
in a
and
way,
what's
we can
out.
kind of
it's
imagine
kind of
that
tribal
we would want to
idea,
support
you're
them because
in our
they're
tribe
for the
or
grace
you're
of God
out.
go
And in
I.
order
You
to
know,
be
it could happen
in,
to me.
you
I
have to
suppose the
look a certain
tricky
way,
bit
behave a certain
comes
way, have
when
a
we're
certain
looking
amount of
at
staff, or
homelessness, when
treat
we're
people
looking
in a
at
certain way,
domestic
speak a
violence,
certain
when we're
language,
looking at
and
drug
if you
addiction
don't,
and
then you're
alcoholism.
and
When we're
certainly
looking at
within the
people
in
with
the world
severe
that we
mental
live in now,
health issues
our
who
system
end
here
up
in this
living on the
country
street
and other countries
and
as well.
they probably
don't
look like we like.
Humans are really good at defining
I mean,
what's worthy
again,
and what
they're
is
but
what's
for the
in
grace
and what's
of God
out.
go
I mean, it's
but,
kind of that tribal
somehow
idea.
or other
in our tribe
or you're
we
out.
make
And in order to be
decisions
based
in,
on what those
you
people
have to
look
look a
like
certain
as
way,
to whether
behave
they
a certain
deserve
way, have a
our
certain amount of
support.
staff, or
Because we have
treat
to
people in a
give
certain way,
our
speak a
support.
certain language, and if you
that
don't,
we have to
then
be
you're
we
out.
have to be judicial in a way
and
to
certainly
decide
within
who is
in the world
worthy
that we
enough
live in now,
to
our
get
system here in
my
this country
support.
and other
Exactly.
countries
It's
as well.
interesting
It's
as you're
very
talking about
punitive.
that. It's making me think. I
Humans
mean,
are
this
really good at
program is
defining what's
financial
worthy and
therapy,
what is
so I'm
what's
always
in and
kind of
what's out.
looking
I mean,
at
it's
what's
kind of
the
that tribal
motivation
idea. You're
behind
in our tribe
a lot of
or you're out. And in
issues
order to
around
be
money or
in,
finances.
you have to
You know,
look
as a
certain way,
psychotherapist,
behave
I'd
a
be
certain
interested
way, have
to
a certain amount of
understand,
staff, or
you know, what
treat
is it
people in a
kind of
certain way,
behind
speak
the
a certain language,
motivation,
and if you
you know, why
don't,
we
then
see
you're
someone
out.
as being worthy for our
and certainly within
support
the world that
or
we live
whatever.
in now,
What's happening
our
inside that
system here in
individual's
this
mind,
country and other
essentially,
countries as
do you
well.
think?
It's very punitive.
Well, I couldn't
Humans are
know
really good at defining what's worthy and what is what's in and
what I
what's
can
out.
generalize
kind of
from
that
my
tribal
experience
idea.
of working
You're
with
in our
marketing
tribe
companies in
or
particular
you're
and
out.
advertising
in order
companies
to
who
be
do
in,
massive
you have
amounts
to
of
look a
market
certain
research
way,
to look at
behave a
what
certain
will
way, have a certain amount of staff,
stimulate people
treat
to
people in a
give.
certain way, speak a certain
And I
language,
guess there
and
are
if
some
you don't,
generalizations.
then you're
And I
out.
think one of them is
and
that
certainly within
somehow or other
the world
we need
that
to
we live in now,
resonate
our
with that
system here in this
individual.
country and other countries.
We
as well.
somehow need to
It's
see
very
ourselves
punitive.
in
Humans
that
are
other
really good
person,
at defining
you know,
what's
or
worthy and what
if
is
we
what's
don't
in
see
and what's
ourselves,
out.
maybe
I mean,
see
it's
a
kind of
loved
that
one.
tribal
So,
idea. You know,
for
you're
instance,
in our
with the
tribe
Cancer
or you're
Council
out. And in order to be
fundraising,
in, you
most
have
of the
to look
people
a
who
certain
fundraise
way,
are
behave
people
a certain
who
way,
have had
a certain amount of
cancer
staff,
or who have had a loved
treat
one
people
with
in a certain
cancer.
way, speak a
And
certain
that universally
language,
affects
and if you
lots of
don't,
people,
then
including
you're out.
homeless people and people with
and
alcohol
certainly
problems.
within the world
But
that we live
generally
in now,
speaking, the people
our
that
system
are
here in this
giving
country
money
and
to the
other
Cancer
countries as well,
Council,
it's very
one could,
punitive.
I mean, I don't have
really
these
good at defining
statistics
what's
in front of me, and I
what's
don't
in
know
and
this
what's
to be a
out.
fact, but
I mean,
I'm
it's kind of that
imagining, given
tribal
what I know
idea,
about
you know,
human
you're
nature,
in our tribe
most of them are
or
people
you're
who
out.
look like
And
me.
in order to be
Right.
in,
And again,
look
that
a certain
organization
way,
kind of
behave a certain
decides
way,
those
have a certain
people
amount
are
of staff,
motivated
or
to give because
treat
they've
people in a
experienced
certain way,
it
speak a
themselves.
certain language,
They know
and if
people
you
that
don't,
loved ones
then you're
experienced
out.
it.
Yeah.
And
maybe
certainly
that
within
loved one
in the
had
world that we
alcohol
live in
problems
now,
or
we,
mental health
our
problems
system
as
here in
well.
this country,
But when I
and
go
other
there,
countries
most of
as
the people
well, I
it's
see
very
are people who
punitive.
look like me.
Humans are
Right.
really good at
So are
defining
you
what's
saying
worthy
that
and what is, what's in
it's
and
kind
what's
of conditional
out. I mean, it's kind of
compassion,
that
meaning
tribal
that I
idea,
can be
you know, you're in our
compassionate
tribe or
within
you're
the
out.
sphere
And
of
in
what I
order to
know,
be in,
or
you have to
these
look a
people
certain
look
way,
like
behave a
me. When you
certain way,
say,
have a
you
certain
know, they
amount of
look like me, they're
staff,
my
or
kind of people, I
treat
can
people in a
experience
certain way,
myself in
speak a
that, or
certain
I can
language, and
experience
if you
my own
don't,
family or
then you're
someone I
out.
love yeah. that's going through
And
that. So
certainly
my
within the
compassion
world that we live in
is
now,
more
with
likely
our system here in
bestowed
this country
on
and
this
other
particular
countries as well,
cohort
it's very
than, say, something
punitive.
else.
Humans are really good
Is that
at
what you're
defining
saying?
what's
I think
worthy
so.
and what
I
is,
mean, I'm
what's
not
in
an
and what's
expert in this
out.
field,
I mean,
and I
it's
don't
kind
have
of that
any,
tribal
any
idea,
research
you know,
evidence
you're
to
in
show
our
that.
tribe
But certainly,
or you're out. And in order
that
to be
resonates
in,
with me.
you have to look a certain
Yeah.
way,
that
behave a certain
that
way, have
I'm
a
going
certain
to
amount
give
of
to
staff,
something
or
that matters
treat
to
people
me.
in a certain way, speak a certain language.
I mean,
and
I
if you
give to a lot
don't,
of
then you're
African
out.
charities
Yeah.
that support people in
And
Africa.
certainly
Because
within
I
the
traveled
in the world that
for
we live
many
in now,
years
our
to and
system
from
here in this
Africa. So I have a
country and other
personal
countries as well,
relationship.
very punitive.
There's a personal
Humans are really
motivation
good at
for me,
defining what's worthy and what is, what's
around
in
Africa
and what's
because
out.
of the
I mean,
people
it's
that I
kind of
met
that
and the
tribal
experiences
idea, you
that
know,
I
you're
had.
in our
But
tribe
if I'd never
or
been
you're
to
out.
Africa,
And in
I
order
may
to
not
be
have any
in,
interest
you have
whatsoever.
to look a certain
Yeah.
way, behave
I
a certain
understand.
way, have a certain amount of
In
staff.
that, it
or
also makes me think,
treat
you know,
people
as
in
a
a certain way,
therapist, I'm
speak a
often
certain
looking at
language, and if you
early
don't, then you're
relationships
out.
about our
Yeah.
money stories,
And certainly
what it was
within
like for us
in the
when we
world
were
that we live
growing
in
up.
now, our
And we
system here
call
in
this sort of
country
early
and other
attachment
countries
to
as
our
well, it's
caregivers
very
in order for us
punitive.
to survive.
Humans are really
And something
good at
I often
defining
consider
what's
a bit
worthy and what
is that
what's in and what's
the
out.
way we
I mean, it's
perceive
kind of that
survival
tribal
has been
idea,
kind
you know,
of
you're
built
in
in
our
those
tribe
early
or you're
relationship
out. And in
years
order to
where,
be in,
say,
you have
mum
to look a certain
metaphorically
way, behave
is
a
holding,
certain way,
you know,
have a
we're
certain
sitting
amount
around
of
a dinner
staff,
table
or
and she's
treat
got
people in a
limited
certain way,
time and
speak a certain
limited
language, and
energy,
if you
and we're
don't,
kind of
then
being
you're out.
spooned out
Yeah.
our portion
And
around that
certainly
dinner
within
table.
in the
And
world
I
that we live
feel
in now,
like we
our
often
system
just
here in
then
this
take
country
that
and
for the
other
rest of our
countries as well,
lives.
it's very punitive.
Was
Humans are
I,
really
you
good
know,
at defining
in order
what's
for
worthy
me
and
to
what
get
is,
a
what's
bigger
in and
bowl
what's
full
out.
of
I
mum's
mean, it's
time
kind
and
of
mum's
that
love and
tribal
mum's
idea, you know,
energy,
you're in
then
our
I need to be
tribe
the good
or
girl,
you're
or I
out.
need to
And
be
in order
the
to be
right girl,
in,
or I need to
you
be
have to look a
the
certain way,
whatever that
behave a certain way,
definition
have a certain
is.
amount of staff, or
And we
treat
then
people in a
project
certain
that
way,
back
speak a certain
into
language,
the
and
world.
if
We
you
look at it
don't,
in our
then you're
political
out.
decisions.
Yeah.
We look at it
And
in
certainly
our
within
even our
in the world that we
partners
live
to a
in
certain
now,
extent. Am I
our
going to
system
get
here
that
in this
same sort of
country and other
nourishment that
countries
I'm
as well,
longing
it's very
for that was
punitive.
built way back in the
Humans are
early
really good at
days?
defining
And we
what's
really
worthy and what
project
is,
that
what's in and what's out.
competition
I mean, it's kind of
slash
that tribal
compassion,
idea,
you know,
you're in our
which one's
tribe
here?
or
Am I
you're
being
out. And in order to be
compassionate, or I'm actually
in,
trying to be
you
in
have to look a certain
competition
way,
to get the
behave a
goodies?
certain way, have a certain
You know,
amount
and I
of
think
staff,
that's
or
where we're
treat
always
people
sort
in a
of
certain
looking
way,
at
speak
that
a certain
riser, or
language, and
always
if you don't,
determining
then you're out.
that
Yeah.
we're
And
putting that
certainly
out on our
within
judgments
in
on the
world
world
that
and
we
who's
live in now,
deserving, who's
our
worthy,
system here in
who's
this country
am I
and
more
other
worthy
countries
than
as
them?
well,
Are
it's
they?
very
Yeah.
punitive.
What do you think?
Humans are
I
really
think
good at
that's
defining
no, I
what's
think
worthy
it's
and what is,
absolutely
what's in
true.
and what's
And I
out.
think,
I mean,
we've
it's kind
got
of
not
that
just
tribal
mom at the
idea,
table,
you
but
know,
we've
you're
got the
in our
culture that we
tribe
grow
or
up
you're
in.
out.
That
And in order
mom's
to
just
be
an
in,
agent of the
you have to look
culture,
a certain
and
way,
her mom was
behave
the
a certain
agent of
way,
the
have a
culture.
certain amount of
You know,
staff,
generations back,
treat people in a
our
certain way, speak a
cultural
certain language,
reference
and if you
points
don't,
and the
then you're
standards
out.
by
Yeah.
which we're supposed to
And
behave.
certainly
So
within
if I talk
world
about
that we live
myself,
in now,
I grew up
our
in a white
system here in this
Anglo-Saxon
country
Protestant
and other countries as well. And to be deserving, very punitive. You had to humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what's in and what's out. You couldn't speak. It's kind of that tribal idea. You had to sit still. You're in our tribe, or you're out. And in order to be if you didn't do those things, you got punished and sent to your room without a certain amount of stuff. So that the next time you treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and because you don't, then you're out. And so we grow up certainly within the world that's a kind of white Anglo-Saxon system here in this country and other countries there are rules for behavior. It's very punitive. People are born inherently bad, and so what you have to do is you have to make kind of that tribal idea. You're in our tribe or you're out. Thankfully, we live in a different kind of world now, and for the most part, behave a certain way, have a certain amount of stuff. It's now we understand a certain way, speak a certain language, and if you don't, we need to nurture and love our and certainly within the world that we live in now, we're doing our system here in this country and other countries as well. If we don't feed them because because they cry too much.
Humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what isn't, what's in and what's out. I mean, it's kind of that tribal idea. You know, you're in our tribe, and so we have a different attitude now. And I'm hoping that kind of opening up of our knowledge about treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and how we need to kind of change our and certainly within the world so that we're more open to the way here in this country and other children develop, how their nervous systems develop, how we can really good at defining what's worthy and what isn't, what's in and what's out. How we can help them flourish and thrive idea. You know, by not making them go to their room. And in order to be if they talk out of turn at dinner without their dinner, you know, I mean, have a certain amount of stuff. It's not going to get the result people in a certain way, speak a certain language, child. Don't, then you're going to create somebody who's going to have some issues around rigidity, our system, the idea of perfection, and so I think this applies very in this broader sense. Humans whatever we learned in our home about what made you worthy to receive. I mean, it's kind of that love or acceptance in our tribe, nourishment, and in order to be we apply that when we grow up a certain way, behave a certain way, around us. And so if they don't behave in the way that we were trained, you needed to behave and if you don't, then you're to be loved. Then we're going to withdraw and love in the world that we live in now. And in a broader sense, country and other countries outside of our very punitive. You know, humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what's in and what's out. Have a drug addiction. I mean, it's kind of that tribal idea. You know, somehow or other, in our tribe going to or you're out. And in order to be in, you have to look a certain way, behave a certain way, have a certain amount of stuff or treat people in a certain way.
That's really interesting. I mean, that's again going back into what you're saying about, you know, you're not going to get the support that we need. And that because organizations have a very limited resources, they have to make that decision of God, who gets our support and who is worthy and who's good, and you know, and I mean, when you've got a lot of comorbidity for certain client groups,
you have to look a certain way,
they may be excluded, deemed unworthy for the care because they're not compliant in the requirements of what this organisation is.
And certainly within the world,
it's a challenge on the compassionate scope, you know, spectrum.
It's very punitive.
Because there are certain limited resources that organisations are going to have to sometimes make hard-line calls on people that are not compliant with their services, and that means that certain people that are in need of care fall through the cracks because they're not compliant. I'm not saying there's a simple solution. I think it's important that we start looking at it, or at least having a conversation about this is what's happening. Certainly in Australia at the moment, you know, one of the biggest issues that we have is about the rate of the unemployment supplement and how low relatively it is for other OECD countries. And I think that there's often, you know, it always makes me, when I'm thinking about politicians, when they're making those choices around the rate that should be out there, that it takes me back into that idea of being where that one kid around the family table says, no, the other one doesn't deserve it, you know, and how, I mean, these people are adults making these political decisions, but to me, when I look at it, it looks like a whole bunch of kids saying, well, he doesn't deserve more peace because he's been naughty, and you know,
you have to look a certain way, and that's absolutely have a certain amount of stuff.
I mean, we make these judgments, and I think it's important that we kind of look at maybe the motivation behind our political systems and behind, you know, who is more deserving, or who is that worthy bias, who is or who is not worthy. I think we need to have a little bit more of consideration to see, okay, well, where is my personal bias on this? Am I projecting that onto these decisions?
You have to look a certain way, behave a certain way, have a really good description of treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language. It comes from our personal background, what we learn about the world and what's okay within our family, what's acceptable and makes us worthy within our family. But as I said before, that family is really good at defining what's worthy and what's in and what's out. I mean, it's kind of that compliance requirements in our tribe, or you're out. And in order to be around what's worthy and what isn't worthy, and that goes through our political system and through our treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and if you don't, churches and yes, and certainly within the really good at defining what's worthy and what is what's in and what's out. In this country, it's kind of that tribal idea. Well, you're in our tribe or you're out. Humans and in order to be defining what's worthy and what is what's in and what's out. Behave a certain way, have a certain amount of stuff, or you're in our treat tribe, people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and if you don't, you have to then you're out. Way, behave a certain way, and have certainly within the world that we live in now, treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and other countries as well. It's very punitive, and certainly within the deserving poor are those who are willing to work here in this country and other countries as well. What kind of very punitive they have, or how much money they make. It doesn't matter. They just need to be willing to work out, toe the line, do what they're told. You're in our tribe, or don't make a fuss. And in order to be in the dinner table, you have to look a certain way. Don't make a fuss. Don't say you don't want to eat stuff, or you're not going to get anything. Treat people in a certain way. Don't kick your brother under the table. Don't, then you're out. Don't somehow step out of that norm. Our system here in this country and other countries, you've had no contribution to setting it all. Humans are really good at defining because if you do, you're not going to get what's in and what's out. I mean, it's kind of that tribal idea. You're either in our tribe or you're out. Unfortunately, that's the kind of it's not like that everywhere, as we know. And certainly the whole treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and if resurgence of a push for a basic income. Every human being just deserves an amount of money that will enable them to be housed in this country and other countries as well. It's very punitive. And the research around defining what's worthy and what is what's in and what's out. In the places where they've done that, it hasn't meant people have stopped working. And in fact, people have been able to work more because they don't have to actually stay home and take care of their children because there's nobody there. Treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and if you don't, it gives them the sense that they deserve. And certainly within the world that we live in now, our system,
and it's a baseline deserving. It's I have a right to be able to thrive in a way, regardless of my background, my trauma, my race, my creed. It just has that sort of basic right to thrive, I think, which is what you're talking about. It was interesting that you were talking about being in the tribe, and we know that shame, in a way, is an evolutionary way of treating people in the tribe in order that they conform to social norms. I like to talk about money and shame often because it's something that we don't talk enough about, how much we do feel a lot of shame. Certainly when I'm working with clients, it's one of the big pieces that I had myself projected here of what I was going to achieve, and life turned up in a very different way. But as we have, and you've said many times, as we have these certain conformed ideas of the way we should be operating, whether it's around work or achievement or success or good enough to get the goodies, then we kind of shame people if they're not that. And I think the benefit of what we're seeing in COVID and with a lot of people losing their jobs is that life can throw you curveballs, and it's got nothing to do with whether you're good enough or you're got the right stuff or you're right in line with what the expectations of society. And I think we need to kind of soften this idea that anyone at any moment, if through illness, being underinsured, it could all possibly, through divorce is a big piece, it could all fall over. And why should we be punished by not having systems in place in a civilized society that can support us? And so I think that, again, it's that worthy bias. It's like we've got this internal perception of what we deem as being who is worthy and who is not worthy. And I think it's a conversation we need to open up a little bit more to see, actually, this is an unconscious bias in me. This is because of my history, because of my dinner table scenarios when I was a kid. And this is, if we bring enough awareness to it, then there may be public policy such as universal basic income can be, maybe put on the table a bit more, or at least, we can raise the rate of, support funding for people in Australia or anywhere around the world, or wherever people are listening. But actually, that's that's a kind of a human right, is that we can be taken care of if the economy is capable to be doing so.
Or you're out. And we know that it is because, you have to look it's just a matter of priorities. But I want to pick up on what you said about shame, because treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language. We've been talking about how organizational structures, and certainly within the world that we kind of apply this to us and sort of shame us and other countries as well. A shame, it's very punitive, shame-making element to really good at defining what's worthy and what isn't. You're not working hard enough to get a job, so we won't give you quite enough to live on, or you're out, and we'll make you jump through a million hoops and try to find jobs that are non-existent and aren't there, but you still have to do it. Treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language. But we apply this shame to ourselves as well. So it's not just from the culture and from the society that we live in. We have embedded in ourselves this shame. So the number of times that I spoke to people with MS who have been unable to carry on working because of the impact of the disease and the symptoms on them and the disabilities they acquired, who were ashamed of themselves for not somehow feeding it or treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and if you don't, then you're out. And we're ashamed, and certainly within the world that we live in now, they become chronically ill or disabled. And this is something I'm sure that you encounter a lot in your work. Humans are really good at defining shame for not meeting the criteria, for not being worthy enough. In our tribe, embedded in us, and we carry it into our own lives as well. So we shame ourselves, behave a certain way, have a certain amount of staff, or treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and if you don't, my staff were all working, and certainly within the world that we live in now, it was really dedicated, and other countries as well, really trying to help people get through those hoops that they had to get through, even if it didn't look like they could to start with. We worked ourselves to the bone really to try and get everybody that we could help helped, and that was what we felt our mission in life was. Treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and if you don't, then you're out. Marketing, having fun with the advertising within the world that we live in now, managing our replacement of light globes and other countries as well. Not working at the coalface with individuals. Humans are really good at defining what's staff what's in and what's out. Leave work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon because they needed to go home and take care of themselves and have a break. You have to look and I can remember my boss have a certain amount of staff. Took me aside one day and said, treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and if you don't, then you're out. And everybody else is still here till 6:30 and certainly within the world that we live in now, the finance team, most of them are still here, and other countries, the marketing team. It's very punitive. I said they leave so they can take care of themselves, so they can actually manage what's in and what's out. I mean, on behalf of the organization, this massive amount of emotional upheaval that is being presented to them from individuals every day. And I said, and I'm not going to have you shame my speak a certain language, and if you're leaving and taking care of themselves so that they can come back in the morning and continue to support the people that we're here, our system here in this country and other you guys are doing necessary jobs. Very punitive. But you're not. Humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what's in and what's out. I mean, it's kind of that tribal idea. Trauma. In our tribe, you get traumatized yourself if you don't take care of yourself in those kind of organizations. And that's largely because the people who encounter people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and if you don't, then you're full of shame. And certainly within the world that we live in now, because they're not conforming to what's worthy in other countries as well. It's very punitive. Humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what's in and what's out. And we live in a society that continues to shame in our tribe for not fitting the norm. And in order to be in, and that then becomes an added burden. Not only do you not have a certain amount of staff or the ability to walk, treat people in a certain way, but now you have to feel ashamed about it. If you don't, then you're out. And certainly
you've really touched on something that I often speak to my clients who have been working at home, of course, in the time of COVID.
Very punitive.
And the big issue for them, working mothers that are juggling to get their kids on time, get them to school and on time in pre-COVID, all the requirements of needing to look after a family as well as holding down a full-time job. And when their personal lives are impinging on their work life, how much they overcompensate in order to continue to be professional and continue to be able to give their absolute 110% at the risk of maybe being present for their children. And what's been interesting speaking to a lot of my clients this time is like how much of a relief it has been to get off that treadmill, to say actually, to be able to spend time with the kids in a really nourishing way and very present way has been a relief, and still being able to do the work, still being able to do what is required for their job as well. And I think that's a big piece that we again get shamed about is that are we not giving enough blood, sweat, tears, bones for the organisation and work that we have in order to get the pay packet, in order to look after ourselves and our children and things like that. So I think that cultural or societal expectation that you have to give every part of yourself 100% to the pay packet over life in general. And I think that COVID has really opened up that possibility. Like, what's this all for? Survival is our need to survive is pushing us where we have to compromise so much of ourselves. And I'm not saying that work is not important, but it's just to see that we maybe is our boss or is our organisation pushing something that's kind of a little unreasonable in ourselves. Because they're being pushed.
Humans are really good at it's all about global making what's out. But it's kind of that tribal idea. You're in our tribe, it's not that much different from the days of the Dark Ages. You have to look a certain way, behave a certain way, have a certain amount of stuff, worked, treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language. They just don't to enrich. And certainly within the world that king, now our system here in this country and other countries as well. Instead of necessarily individuals, humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what isn't.
And shareholders, faceless shareholders.
Kind of that tribal idea. Require us in our tribe, or this is where, and in order to be so many people fall you have to look a certain way, behave a certain way, have a certain amount of stuff, in a world where treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and if we don't, how many people have cancer? And certainly within the something like 25% of our system here in this country and other countries, something like 49% of young women. Humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what isn't, what's in and what's out. Which will, it's kind of that some form at some level in our tribe, or you're out. All the men who you have to look a certain war, or who have to work 80-hour weeks, or treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, everybody in their family, because they're the only ones that are actually going to be able to get a job that we live in now. Going to pay enough our system here in this country and other countries as well. We are actually living in a culture where humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what isn't, what's in and what's out. I mean, it's kind of that being able to achieve what we in our tribe worthy people achieve. And in order to fancy cars, big houses, you have to look a certain way, behave a certain way, have a certain amount of some kind that comes from treat people in a certain way, speak a certain language, and if you don't, then you're out. What percentage of the population has got to that point where they can have a BMW in the driveway and a house and a beach house and a fancy holiday overseas every year? Humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what's in and what's out. I mean, it's kind of that tribal idea. You're in our tribe or you're out. And in order to be they may have gotten a few steps ahead, but 5 minutes later they're a few steps behind because COVID comes and they lose treat people in a certain way,
or they get ill,
or they get ill, or just they get cancer, and certainly within the world that illness, or they have our system here in this country and other countries as well. It's very punitive. Humans are really good at defining
and so it just shows that very fragile
out.
house of cards at any moment, and yet we're being internally and externally, as you were saying earlier, we do it to ourselves. We are flogging ourselves, and society is flogging us for a certain expectation, and we can't get off that expectation treadmill. Really, we're kind of a slave to it, and we're all kind of in this soup of expectation and ideals.
Yeah. It's very punitive. Like you, Jane, I see a lot of really good at defining what's worthy and what's in and what's out. I mean, it's kind of that tribal. I see a lot of people who are in our tribe or you're out. And a lot of what people talk about is look a certain way, behave a certain way, have a certain amount of stuff, or treat people in a certain way.
Jan, it has been absolutely gorgeous and wonderful and insightful speaking to you.
And certainly
I think we've gained a lot about looking at the pressure that we put ourselves under, and I just, as we finish up, is there anything that you, I suppose, wanted to share with our listeners about how we can deal with, the internal and external expectations we certainly have financially? As we've been talking about this big subject of worthiness, or what we deem as being worthy or worthy bias.
Well, I guess what I'd like to say, it comes back certainly within the world of compassion, which our system here in this country, in the air everywhere around us now, very punitive. But I find that humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what's in and what's out. That really what helps people kind of feel in our tribe or you're out. And in order to be in, compassion really brings behave a certain way, have a certain amount of stuff, or some kind of resolution for people. And it's not just compassion of others, though that's what we do in psychotherapy, is we provide a space where people can be in the presence of a compassionate person who's not demanding anything of them, but who's just there to support
Humans are really good at defining what's worthy and what's in
but
and
it's
what's
also
out.
about self-compassion.
I mean, it's kind of that tribal idea.
And
you're
when we
in
can
our
have
tribe
compassion for
or you're
self,
out.
we
And
can
in
then
order
start
to
to have
in,
compassion for
you have to look a certain
the
way,
others
behave a
around
certain
us.
way, have a certain
It
amount
really
of stuff,
starts at
or
home.
treat people in a certain way.
It's not
speak
something
a
that you
certain
can apply to
language, and
everybody
if you
else in the
don't,
world.
then you're out.
And not yourself.
And certainly within
you
the,
have to
in
really
the world that we live in now,
apply it to yourself.
our system here in this country and
in
other
my own
countries
work,
as well,
really it starts
punitive.
with that compassionate
Humans
self
are really
and
good at
how
defining
we
what's
deal
worthy
with
and what's in
big
and what's
issues
out.
in our
I mean,
life,
it's
not
kind
just
of that
financial
tribal
but
idea.
relational
You're
as
in our
well.
tribe or
So
you're
what would you say
out.
to
And in order
listeners
to be
about
in,
how they could best cope with or deal with some of the pressures that we have
treat
in
people in a
life?
certain way, speak a certain language, and
we
if
go
you
back to the
don't,
whole
then
issue
you're
of
out.
shame that we've discussed.
And
I
certainly
think
within
it's
the
having the
in the world that
courage
we
to
live in now,
seek out
our
the
system
kind of
here in this
support that you
country
need from
and other
a
countries
therapist
as well.
or a counselor.
It's very punitive.
And be
Humans are really good
willing
at
to
defining
kind of
what's worthy and what's
unpack a
in
little
and
bit.
what's out.
In
I mean, it's
that
kind of
safe
that tribal
environment, that
idea.
safe and
You're
supportive
in our
environment.
tribe or you're out. And in
What
order to
is
be
it? Where
in,
does that shame
you have to look
sit
a certain
within
way,
you?
behave a certain
and how
way,
does
have a
that
certain
look
amount
when
of
you take
stuff,
it out
or
and show
treat
it to
people in a
another
certain
person?
way, speak a certain
Knowing
language,
that you're not
and
going
if
to be
you don't,
judged
then you're
for
out.
it. And having the courage
and
to
certainly
do that.
within the
Because
in the
it
world
is
that we
until you
live in
start
now,
shifting that
our
shame
system
and
here
kind
in
of
this country
navigating
and
it,
other countries,
that you can
humans
really
are really
sort of
good
shake
at
it up
defining what's
into a
worthy
different
and
place.
what's in and what's
Thank you
out.
so much,
I mean, it's
Jan,
kind
for
of that
challenging some of the
tribal
concepts
idea.
we
You're
might
in
have
our
about
tribe or you're
deserving
out.
and
in order to
worthiness,
be
and particularly
in,
shame,
you have to
and
look
how
a certain
important it
way,
is for
behave a
us to
certain
get
way, have a certain
courageous
amount of stuff,
with some
or
help, of
treat
course,
people in a certain
and
way,
hopefully we
speak
can
a certain
invite a
language,
little
and if you
more
don't,
self-compassion,
then you're out.
particularly around our own financial situation. You can find out more about Jan Hatch in the show notes and head over to financialtherapy.org for more resources on how you can be better with money. If you're loving the show, please subscribe, rate and review, and stay tuned for more bigger conversations about us and money.